Hey, y'all. Welcome to Down Ballot Banter, the podcast that puts a spotlight on local elections and what local government actually means for you. I'm Monet Noel Marshall.
And I am Quay Weston.
Yeah, you are.
Local elections are extremely important, and we're on a mission to learn together and to break down local politics in a way that makes sense to us and doesn't require us to be experts.
Because we are not.
Hello.
So whether you're a seasoned voter or this is your first opportunity, we've got the insights and information to keep you informed and engaged.
Because when it comes to building new worlds, all of our inputs matter.
Yes. So if you're ready to learn with us, let's go. Blair, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you asking me to come on here.
Oh my gosh.
I've been a fan,
Me
so
too.
I'm very excited.
I appreciate that.
IG-stalking, basically.
I know. I get most of my political education from you. So
Yes.
Thank you so much for educating the masses.
I heard the other day there's a Kamala Harris for North Carolina women's group, and like someone's like posted like one of the videos on there, and they're like, does anyone know what this guy's name is? And like one of our neighbors was like, yo, I live next to that guy.
Can I share a funny thing about that?
Yeah.
We were just talking about this.
Oh, yeah?
When I said I want to talk to the guy from Carolina Forward, then I went to the website. I Googled Carolina Forward white guy. Googled it, and I was like, what is his name? And then I finally went to like a very old Instagram
Bro,
video.
you should have emailed.
I thought about it. I could have, but I finally found it, and I was like, his name is Blair.
There you go.
And here you are.
Here I am. Yeah.
Which leads to our first question, like, who are you exactly?
Yes.
And like, what is your human story that got you into this work?
Yeah. So I am Blair Reeves. I'm the executive director of Carolina Forward. Carolina Forward is the core group is about 9 or 10 of us. And we were talking about before, we have like a group chat that is basically we call it the Brain Trust group chat, and that is like where we make all our decisions. So we have a board and all this other stuff. The origin story of Carolina Forward, really in a really short version, is 2019. A couple of our state lawmakers in North Carolina proposed a bill that would have armed school teachers and let them carry loaded handguns in their class. Yeah. And the other thing people forget, it would have also allowed community volunteers to come and patrol your kids' school grounds with their AR-15 or whatever. So you imagine like the craziest person in your community rolling around your school, and like it's totally illegal. And I like at that point, our daughter was 2 years old at that point. I was like, that's insane. That's insane. Why would Republican, Democrat, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like anyone knows that's insane. And I was like, I can't do anything. We got to stop this. We got to do something about it. So that began. I don't like pay attention to politics, but I wasn't really activated. But then that was during Trump's presidency, and we all saw like how that went.
Yep.
Right. And so I went through a series of steps, and what I realized was that the reason why that bill came up, it did not pass, but the reason why it came up and why they proposed in the first place is because they don't care. And like there's a couple of people behind it, but like if you take out those people, they're more weirdos behind it. And the reason is because of gerrymandering, right? The legislature is completely hijacked. And there was there wasn't a whole lot of groups in the state speaking out very effectively against that whole kind of project. There are a lot of really good kind of single issue groups out there, and they do, a decent job. But I met a number of activists along the way. We did some fundraising in the 2020 cycle for different candidates. We won some of those races for the legislature. We lost some other ones. And then we had this like group that kind of started to coalesce, and we said, we should just start our thing. And we just called the Carolina Forward. And we don't have like people don't believe me when I say this, but we actually don't have like a partisan like bent. Like we're not a partisan organization. We're a values-led organization.
Right.
Like we are happy to, talk about and promote like any Republican candidate who wants to fully fund public schools or wants to push back against an abortion ban. I haven't met one yet.
Right.
And I'm happy to do that when that comes around. So like what if we ever show like a preference, like so those partisan political preferences follow a set of values. And I think the problem we're having right now is that a lot of people turn that around. And that's why we're in the mess we are today. And I think that people are starting to come around in certain ways. And now we are about 4.5 years later. And we have, we have our email list, we have web presence, social media stuff. Obviously, we do a lot of polling research. We do policy white papers, all the stuff you do as like a broad cross issue organization. And I think we're doing a pretty good job, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that actually leads me to a part of what we were hoping to talk about here is because we are such fans of the work you're doing, where you post these weekly updates almost not every day. Is it every day?
No, not every day. Yeah,
Very often.
Regularly enough. Every week
Post
at
one
least.
this morning. Right? So.
Yeah, I'm like, this is what happened. And I always go to the page just to see if there's a new post.
Oh, cool.
But I want to ask a question about like access to information. And some of the challenges that you witness as you're sharing out these updates. Like, what do you see, or from your perspective, like what are the gaps there for people to be aware and stay up to date on what's happening around the state?
So it's never been easy to follow state level, local level information.
True.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So we're here in Durham, like Herald Sun, like it's good, but like it's not what it once was, right? There used to be more kind of outlets of information. The problem we're having right now, and this is a broader problem in the news media generally, is that Facebook and Google took away all the advertising revenue, right? So now, even back in like the good old days, like 30, 40 years ago, like subscriber fees never kept newspapers alive. Right. It was advertising dollars. The subscriber things was on top of that. Then you have, we're all on our phones, right? Like I don't have a paper newspaper. No one does, right? There's basically one news outlet in the world that has really managed to take off and like sustain itself with subscriber fees, and that's the New York Times.
Right.
And outside of that, you have a lot of these groups. I mean, CNN, Fox News, even. I mean, a lot of them have a hard time. Their margins are small, and they have to appeal to a gigantic audience, and all that sort of stuff. So you go down to the state level, people have a hard time finding any information on the state level, and you have a finite amount of time. You're probably looking at CNN. You might be looking at New York Times, NBC, whatever that is. There aren't a lot of state level, organizations that are giving you good information. We have the News and Observer. There's the WRAL, Herald Sun, obviously. Those Herald Sun, News and Observer, and Charlotte Observer are all the same company. They share a lot of the same resources. They share a lot of the same stories.
Right.
The company that owns them is a conglomerate that owns like news organizations in a lot of states, and they make a lot of questionable decisions, and they suck those papers dry. So you don't get the coverage you once did even 10 years ago, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And then there's like interest. Like people aren't always that interested, or they don't know why they should be interested in information. Right now, Durham is kind of an exception. Durham has a very engaged population. The locals here want to know stuff about what's going on, like what's going on in the Durham City Council, Durham County Commission, all that stuff. Like people are really into that. But you go out to Pitt County, right? There's nothing. You go out to like Duplin County, Stokes County, there is nothing out there. And people out there then default to a national level news. And that's why you'll go into like a rural county, they can tell you everything about Hunter Biden's laptop. They have no idea who the county commissioners are.
And I think that's so interesting, and part of why we wanted to do this work specifically, because I feel like there is an idea that because people have not shown interest, that means they don't care. But really, I do think that the gap in information is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And if people really understood like why that policy that is being passed, that law is being passed, how it impacts their everyday life, they'd be like, oh, actually, let me show up because I actually really care about that. So I wonder for you, and I see these videos and everything you post, like there's a way that you're able to make it really accessible. So I'm really curious about how do you take these like state and local policies and like bring them to the ground for everyday folks? Like this is why this matters to you.
Yeah. So the real answer is you just like talk like a normal person. So the problem, I mean, the problem is like when politicians, when the political leaders do try to do this stuff, some of them do, a few of them do. I think Jeff Jackson does a really good job of it. But you know, and some of them do as well. But a lot of them who try to do it, they wind up sounding like a hostage negotiation. Like you're reading from they're clearly reading from this thing right here.
Right.
You know, like it's so flat. And so another problem is that on social media, you have to be certain stories work better on social. You have to get people's engagement. We're surfing the algorithm, right? And there's no secret sauce. Like maybe there isn't. I don't know what it is. You have to make people do something people care about. That's one thing. The other thing is that social media is the dominant way that most people get their news now. And one issue that we're seeing is that like there's no business case for WRAL or WNC even, or one of these other ones to do what we do.
Right.
Because they can't make advertising dollars off of it. There's no way they can make any money off of it. So there's no reason why they would do that. And their play there is to be present on those platforms to get you to come to their platform and consume their content. That doesn't really work. And it's not their fault. It's the fault of the platforms that are designed to suck up advertising dollars. I don't know what they do about that.
As a part of that, I was thinking about the conversation around rural counties. I'm from Beaufort County, North Carolina.
You're in Beaufort?
Yeah. Pantego, specifically. Right outside of Little Washington.
How you say it for real?
Pantego.
I've never heard you say it like that.
That's what we say. And I think interestingly, something I'm curious about too is with so much information being on social media, one thing I find, and I think, reports and other things show, is just how much disinformation and misinformation is available to us.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about how you maybe source the information that you're sharing with people, and how we do better about being able to tell whether something is misleading or clear in its kind of objectives.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a hard question because I do think that there's a lot. Obviously, social media is full of bad information, right? And it's not always all from one side or the other side, right? Like I see liberals sharing bad information as well. I do think it's disproportionately on the other side. You see a lot of Kamala Harris is actually an alien.
You're like, all right.
Hillary Clinton, got the Bill Gates vaccine. She levitates and she's actually controlled by, whatever.
Yep.
Lots of nonsense. It's important to know that misinformation goes back a long way. Like a long time ago, people believed crazy stuff years and years ago. So my grandmother is from Knoxville, Tennessee, and in Tennessee, in Knoxville in particular, they did not fluorinate their water until the 80s because it was a secret communist plot to control your children.
Naturally.
Yeah. So, and that's coming back, by the way. That's in Union County now. Down in Union County, they're defluorinating their water now.
Defluorinating the water.
It's a couple of their cities.
We don't have the dental care in this country for us to defluorinate.
To be out here
nothing.
Okay.
Can't even get into that. Yeah. So this problem has been around for a while, right? But I think that the answer, the hard answer is the real answer, and that is you have to trust. And we are becoming a lower trust society.
Yes, we are.
That's right.
And if you don't trust anything, then you'll fall for anything. If you don't feel like you can trust anyone, then you're not going to trust any information that anyone says. And it's going to be, that's when you get into the weird parts of social media where people just decide to believe insane things. And I don't know how you build trust people other than talking to them in language that, we all use and giving good information. So the way I go about doing this stuff, I find a couple of stories that actually matter to the state that I can explain in 30 seconds and not fully. You can't fully explain any of this stuff.
Exactly.
But you can do the nutshell. And you find more or less reliable information sources. You look at what it is. You try not to make mistakes. Everyone's gonna make mistakes every now and then. I've made mistakes too. No large ones yet, though. Knock on wood. And that's going to happen. You accept that's going to happen, and you go with it. And if you can build trust with people, then they'll give you grace for that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of what's happening right now with kind of right wing social media. So they've gone so heavy on the paranoid, crazy stuff for so long that now people are like, oh, what's Trump saying now?
We're kind of running out of things.
Right.
Like, they have to keep getting entertained.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But people are like, okay, now we kind of see what's going on. Right. So,
Yeah. Thank you for that.
I'm thinking a lot about what you said about trust and the ways that we are a low trust society, and also pairing that with how much information we have at our disposal at any given moment. And how can we in our communities, in our local and state, like our local governments and in the state, how can we use our interpersonal relationships to build stronger coalition, to work together and to like cut through the noise?
it's big. I think it's a hard
I know.
thing,
I know.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of this kind of goes back to the fact that like a lot of, you see there's a lot of research around like how people feel more bored than ever today.
Yeah.
They feel more lonely.
Yes.
That's right.
Especially younger people.
Yes.
A lot of people say it's the phones. I think it's partial.
But it's not.
Maybe partly,
right.
not.
People, like when we were kids, people said something about Nintendo. Right.
Right.
You play Nintendo all day, you're gonna turn into a serial killer or something like that. And I don't think that's really true. Yeah. I do think, like, I have 2 small children. I do think a lot about, like, they're obviously not on social media, way too young for that. Do you give them a device, screen time, all this stuff? Like, it does kind of isolate you a little bit, but you're also sort of like connected with people.
Yeah.
Right. I think that it kind of goes back to a lot of that stuff, like how communities how are they woven together? I really think that we need like universal basic hanging out time. Right?
Yes.
Like,
Can we pass that?
Yes, please.
I think people need the barbecue.
Yes.
Right? They need your neighborhood
third spaces.
You need your third spaces.
Yes.
You need the neighborhood cookout.
Yes, we do.
And you need to get together. And that is, there are trade-offs to that because we are very segregated as well.
Yeah.
Durham here, right? Famously so.
Right.
Yep.
Getting a little bit less so over time, but
Yeah.
still very segregated.
But then by class, we're also becoming more. We might be a little more racially integrated, but class, we're still we're going in the opposite direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that goes into like, and these are all things are all connected, right? That's how that connects to housing. Right. Housing crisis makes us more segregated.
Yep.
Right.
And there's no one answer to any of that. But I do think that a lot of this goes back to building trust within networks of communities. That it really is a hanging out problem. I think that it's very, very hard to build trust over Instagram.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I hope people do, but it's not ideal. And I do think you need real world relationships people build with each other. The church has done that did that for a long time. It's not doing that anymore.
Yeah, they stopped feeding
more so
people
in the
at
black
church,
community
man.
than in the white
I'm pissed.
community. But
They stopped feeding people. The repass is really what was holding the community together.
It's a lot.
Okay.
And like in the white community, so church membership is crashing.
Right.
That's right.
Right. Black community, it's also going down, but it's going in different ways.
Yeah.
Hispanic community actually is holding pretty steady, but also very different, depends on your community. And a lot of that is, especially in the white evangelical circles, it's kind of growing insular. And you see, that's how you get like the really weird stuff happening in the super right-wing church.
Yep.
You see some of that in the black community, but not quite as much, I think, just because of the different roles played. But I think that's the role that it plays. And is it still doing that the same way it did? Probably not. And I don't know how you fix that.
Yeah.
Those share ums and
No, it's just so true. And I think, I define myself as a cultural organizer and cultural strategist. And I think a lot about how culture holds us together and how the fact that we practice together and like the fact of being in a space. Like I can see your knees right now. I can't see your knees on Instagram, but like I'm going to have a different relationship to you because I see you as a whole person. And I'm like thinking about your family, your children. And I do think that engenders a different relationship to how we talk to each other and how we're curious. And it does knit. It knits us together differently when you're like, oh, I actually see you as a whole person in this moment, as opposed to like, you're just a username on the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We a human being, we haven't changed in 250,000 years, right? We are all cave people, right? And the way we relate is by talking to each other, right? And that there's nothing that will never change.
Hopefully.
yeah. Hopefully. One thing that as you mentioned community, and I think about like the teams and groups and formations that I'm a part of and communities that I exist in, a lot of the conversation has been about what it takes for us to move forward, right? Politically. Is it that we need to just focus on running candidates or turning over the General Assembly? All these things, I think, to me, are all combined. Or is it we need to focus on money? And until we get money, we can't change any of these things, right? So I'm curious about some of the information you've shared around like PACs and how much money is poured into the political ecosystem. I will start there. I'll start with one question. I tend to ask multiple questions at a time. You'll learn that. Yeah, one question. Could you speak to how money is poured into the political economy and what that then means for people who are voting for candidates or representatives?
That's a great question. I think I heard Dr. Tracy Cottom said something about this on a podcast recently. I forget where it was. It wasn't the Hometown Holler. It might have been somewhere else. But she made a really, really good, I think it was the New York Times. I forget who it is. She made a really good point that, look, especially when you get to the national level politics, like there's just a huge amount of money floating around, right? And at some point, like once you have like a nominee and the candidates are known and this sort of stuff, like the money, it drives a lot of like whatever they do in their campaign. In the Kamala Harris situation, there's this really interesting kind of nether part where Biden was like, I might drop out, I might not drop out. He's giving conflicting messages, whatever. And there's this kind of liminal period where like no one was quite sure what was going to happen. And then we thought he was going to drop out, and then it might be Pete Buttigieg, or it might be Gretchen Whitmer, Roy, right? Or whatever. And there was this, I think there was a gathering of like, you know, a community around Kamala Harris who were like, there's a woman of color who is second to the president right now, who is right here. And you don't have to go searching around for other candidates. She's literally right here. She's vetted, she's ready, and she wants it. And she has the ambition to do it. And in that liminal space there, that's where having both like her political support, but also just community support. We were talking about Divine Nine or whatever before this as well. And I think that there's probably an observation that if they bypassed her,
that would have been a lot.
That would have been real ugly for everyone.
Absolutely.
Because the Dems know that Black women are the ones who are going out, getting so many folks to vote, and they would have felt so disrespected.
Well, they run a lot of the party,
right?
And you serve your friends first before you serve anyone else,
right?
And of course now we've seen like, oh yeah, no, she's super competent. That was a good choice, right? But there was that part there where like, you know, is the money gonna make the decision, or are people around? And I think that speaks to how the systems of all this work. So you asked about like the role of money in this whole ecosystem, and what I think people need to understand is that, you know, we just look at like the state level, right? We're always gonna have parties. We're always gonna have elections, primaries. You know, those camps will have to do things in power and all this stuff. And that requires organization around it. And that's one thing that I do think that Black women in particular, I mean, the Black community in general, has been very keyed into for a long time. Black voters are some of the most strategic out there. They don't really go in for a lot of the change the world revolutionary stuff traditionally, because I don't think they've had the confidence that that's actually going to happen. Or actually going to pan out. That's a whole other conversation. But that's been a phenomenon, and that's why a lot of them run the party, right? You go out to Pitt County, it's Black women, right?
Go to South Carolina, it's Black women,
exactly. And Jim Clyburn saved Joe Biden's hide,
keeping it together,
right.
And we are always going to have these organizations around that, and what I think people need to. They don't have to get comfortable with it, but you have to understand at some point that like there is a party, you have to coalesce around a party and around candidates, and that requires some level of compromise sometimes. Sometimes saying, I don't love that thing she said, but I'm going to overlook it because this is a path to power, and politics is about power. It is not about personalities. It is not about owning people on social media or whatever. It's about power and what happens to all of us. And I think there's a recognition around that, especially right now with Harris, saying like, you don't have to love everything Kamala Harris says, but she's better than Trump in basically every way. And these are your choices. And I think there are some people who are still not comfortable with that, and that's fine. But that is going to be the choice. And there is I think recognition that, for the purposes of, doing politics, you do have to make compromises at some point for the greater good. And that's never going to change. That's just politics, right? And money follows where those decisions lead.
I hear you about money following, and it does feel like, I think part of the question is money following or is money leading? And because I see there's just so much money that goes into certain certain races. And I'm not always clear even where these monies are coming from, right? So we see the commercials like, this is funded by so-and-so, right? But there is no, what is the relationship? How can folks learn more about where the dollars are actually coming from to know who is impacting and who's buying ads and who is like papering my door? That's the question that I have.
So there's the front game and then there's the inside game, right? So there's the hard dollars, there's the soft dollars. Hard dollars is the stuff you can look up. There's financial disclosures, campaign, the State Board of Elections has a campaign finance website. You click in, a candidate's name, Roy Cooper, Josh Stein, Mark Robinson, whatever, and there's their donor list. There's a, contribution limit and all that stuff. That's called hard dollars. You can you're publicly, registered as a contributor. And that's a very important part of their campaign fundraising. It's a minority of their fundraising. So that's the tip of the iceberg. The other 80% or whatever it is below the line. You'll never see it. It's dark money. And it's super frustrating because we don't really get very good information about a lot of these. Some of these organizations will be very open. Like, we're spending $20 million to help Mark Robinson, or we're spending $20 million to help Josh Stein, or whatever it is. Sometimes they don't, and you can only find out through disclosures with the FEC or their tax forms or whatever. It's super, super dark, and they've made it that way here, especially here in North Carolina. What I think people need to understand is that while that stuff is super busted, it's super frustrating. Like, we can't really do a lot about that until the Supreme Court turns over, right? That's Citizens United. They passed. Like, McCain, I'm a conservative Republican. McCain got together with Feingold in Wisconsin. Wisconsin? Yeah, Wisconsin.
Not sure.
That was like early 2002, 20 years ago, whatever. They passed campaign finance reform. They did this thing saying you can't do dark money. It has to be just publicly listed or whatever. And the Supreme Court knocked it down with Citizens United. That was during Obama, and Obama said, "This is going to wreck politics. This means unlimited money in politics," and he was right about that. And there's nothing we can do about any of that until the Supreme Court turns over, maybe one day. But what do people think? This is a long-winded answer.
No.
I'm
fine.
just like,
the thing people need to understand is that money doesn't win politics. Money doesn't win elections. It helps. You have to have a requisite amount of money to win a campaign, to mount a campaign. But look, I think Mitt Romney raised more than Obama did. Who is it? Bill Graham, the guy who ran against Mark Robinson in his primary. He spent like $5 million of his own money. He got like 5% of the vote or something like that. Money doesn't win elections. It helps, but it doesn't win elections. And people with less money do win races all the time. It's harder. You have to have a really clear contrast. But I think people are rightly frustrated about money, and they should be, because it sucks. We are operating under a system that we have no control over right now. And we can talk about how they made it worse in North Carolina. But it's not definitional. It isn't busted, and it doesn't always work.
I would love to hear the quick and dirty of how they made it worse in North Carolina. And also, is there anything that we can do about it?
So back in, I want to say 2013, they passed this big law about a whole bunch of election law changes. One of the things they did was they lifted the maximum. The maximum campaign contribution limit used to be capped. I want to say like $4,000. I could be wrong with that. 3,000, 4,000, something like that. And they raised it to 5,000. And then for that election, and then they said every 2 years, so basically every election cycle, it's going to automatically rise from every year from here on out, pegged to the rate of inflation. So it went from 5,400 to 5,800.
Okay, can we pause for a second? I just want to say that they did that for campaign finance, but they did not do that for the minimum wage or for teachers' pay.
There was actually, and this is the thing, there was actually a bill that same session in 2013, and people were like, we have a minimum wage bill right over here. It's $7.25 an hour, and they're like, well, workers don't need that. And the rationale was like, look, political campaigns keep getting more expensive. We gotta raise the thing. And it was,
but cost of living is not
the world. Okay.
That was the first year of the that the Republicans rigged themselves a supermajority in the legislature. They had Pat McCrory in the government. They didn't need a supermajority, but they passed it, and that is still in place. So the top max contribution this year is $6,400. Minimum wage is still $7.25.
Correct.
Yes, it is.
And in 2 years, it's going to go up. It's going to go big. And that's one of the things they did. Another thing they did, by the way, one of the things we do at Carolina Forward is we file complaints with the State Board of Elections. There are a number of organizations in the state operating as illegal, unregistered PACs. There's one down in New Hanover called the Tide Turners. They print off lawn signs and stickers and buttons and all kinds of stuff for these guys that they're pushing for their county commission, for the statewide office, whatever, just for New Hanover County. They spend a lot of money doing that. They don't report any of it. They don't report their donors. They don't report anything. It's illegal. And we filed a complaint against them last year, or to say 2 years ago. Mark Walker out in Greensboro, he rented a bus with the names and faces of all the Republicans running for judicial races that year. It's called Win the Judges. And he took them. They would get on the bus.
The judges themselves?
The judges themselves get on the bus. They take them to different campaign events, right? All the stuff. Never reported. Didn't report their donors. We don't know who paid for it, right? Didn't report anything.
But I thought that the judges are paid through like that little money that we donate or give when we get our IDs or something.
Oh no.
No, okay, that's not real or true. Wow.
No. They killed judicial public financing for those races. And so
that feels elite. That feels bad.
And so we filed a complaint with that as well. One thing they changed, though, is that now complaints filed with the State Board of Elections are now confidential. So you don't know, one, if they ever did anything with the complaint, if they ever investigated the complaint, if they ever, consequences, or if they folded it. We've never heard of like anything. The reality that a lot of people don't know right now is that most of the election laws in North Carolina are not really being enforced. You have to commit felonies for them to really do anything. A story came out the other day. Mark Robinson spent thousands of dollars in his 2020 campaign at these stores. And so some reporter went to the store, like a kayak store. Can you imagine Mark Robinson in a kayak, by the way?
Got it.
But I really hope he's out there because, for all our mental and emotional wellness, maybe we just need a little kayak
in our life.
His report said he spent $3,000, whatever, at the store. The store owner's like, he just spent $3. It was a kayak store. Yeah. he definitely didn't come here. And that complaint's been at the State Board for like 3 years, and no one's done anything with it.
Why would they entertain the complaint if they don't need to do anything about it?
I mean, you can send a complaint in, right?
It's like having a suggestion box at your job. You just put it in there, and it's like, well,
it makes you feel better.
What's the point of a complaint?
Thank you so much. We're going to take that into consideration.
Things are much, and this is like, I hate to bum people up, but things really are much more busted than people realize. Yeah. And that's by design. It's people in Raleigh have done that in our legislature, and it's going to continue being like that until we throw them out.
That spawned a question for me that isn't on my list, but I want to ask it instead of maybe the question. Until we throw them out, how do you think about accountability for elected people that isn't just waiting to vote them out?
And
do you have any thoughts about that?
And isn't just like yelling about it on the internet, like actual ways to
is there something we just are missing about this?
So I think that one of the things so here in Durham, you just had a big example of this, right? So Durham is super Democratic. Republicans never going to win here, right? And
unless they pretend to be Democrats.
well, you have that. We had one of those in Northeast.
Yes.
Yep.
Trisha Cottom.
Oh no!
Oh no!
You
well,
think
her.
Mecklenburg? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Up in Northampton, Halifax, Warren.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had one of those guys, and so there's a primary. I believe in primaries. I think primaries are great, people. Let me tell you, politicians all hate primaries. They hate primaries because of course you do, right? You have to makes you work, makes you do stuff. In North Carolina, none of them are making any money anyway. So
Right.
I get why they get annoyed by primaries. I like primaries.
Why?
Because it affords them accountability, right? If you can't win a primary, you shouldn't be in office, right? And most people in office, especially in like safe blue seats, never get any challenges, and that's why they get complacent and they get lazy. And if you have a primary challenge and you lose it, then you shouldn't be in office, right? And sometimes that's because the community has moved past where that candidate is, and that there's no one's wrong with that. It's just a fact. Sometimes that candidate isn't serving the people they went to office to serve.
Yep.
Up in Northeast, there is a guy up there in I think Northampton or Halifax. I think I live in Halifax. And he was a Democrat, and he voted like a Republican. That's a super safe, D plus 25 points kind of area, majority black, by the way. And he was not doing that, and he was basically taking money and voting. He voted for the school vouchers. It's going to defund his own school districts.
Yikes.
By millions of dollars, right?
Yikes.
And so we helped support a primary challenger to him, and he narrowly won. And we kicked out a 10-term incumbent up there, which is huge.
Yeah.
And I think that it never happened until Carolina before we got involved, and I'm happy we were able to do that. But I think that we need. And that's because, the Democrats left to their own, any political party left to their own devices is not going to do that. You need strong external organizations that can provide accountability to the Republicans if they're misbehaving, to the Democrats if they're misbehaving. Because there is that on both sides.
Right.
Yep.
And you have to provide some mechanism for accountability. You ask outside of primaries, outside of voting, it's hard because to some extent, like they don't have to listen to you until the next election.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
I'm gonna do whatever I want.
Now, I will say that the better leaders out there, good leaders are going to listen to you no matter what.
Yeah.
And we got a bunch of those, right? We got some of those here in Durham that will listen to you. Maybe they don't agree with you. That's okay. We don't always have to agree, right? But if he'll hear you out and hear you in good faith, that's enough for me. And when we have irreconcilable differences, that's where you say like, well, is a primary challenge like a useful route to go? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Right? It depends what the issue is. But good leaders will hear you out. Bad leaders will not.
So Blair, a question that we're asking all of our guests: what are you dreaming for North Carolina?
Holding the North Carolina Supreme Court and flipping the North Carolina Supreme Court. That's what I would really like to do. That's going to happen in 2028. And it's going to be a little while. I think that North Carolina is changing. We see it changing a lot. You see that in the numbers. You see it in the election returns. You feel it culturally. Like I've been here for 16 years.
I've
been here for a long time. Like the state does feel differently than it did. And I think that's really good. I told you before, I'm from Virginia originally. And I watched Virginia I grew up with completely changed in a positive way. Like Virginia is a better state now than it was 20 years ago. And North Carolina is not as good a state as it was 15 years ago. Our schools are poorer. Our people are more segregated. Our economy has basically tracked the national average, hasn't done especially well. And the state government has left a lot of people behind.
Yeah.
And I think that needs a lot of help. I think that North Carolina is changing, and I want it to change. And that's going to take strategy. It's going to take patience. It's going to take, method to go about that, but it is happening. I think that I don't know if Harris is going to win North Carolina this year or not. I think she has a very good chance.
I think she has a chance.
And the thing I always see is that people never believe that it's going. Things like that are going to happen until they see it happen.
Right.
Yeah.
In Virginia, no one in Richmond believed that Obama was going to win Virginia in 2008.
Right.
No one, and then he did.
Right. Yep.
And then it was like then it's all hindsight. Oh, of course,
of course.
Show the signs, and we see all those signs right now. I don't know if you have trends. I don't know if the trends are going to arrive on time for November 5th.
Yep.
They are going to get here though.
Right.
And I think that the Democrats are pretty well, positioned to do that. We need to keep the Democrats honest. We need to keep them in line.
Yep.
But that is the way you change the state, and then you have to repair a lot of damage because there's been a lot of damage in Raleigh. That's what I'm hoping for North Carolina.
Okay, thank you, Blair. We have some quick, fun questions to end our conversation.
Yes. You want to rotate between them?
Yes.
Okay. 1, Cheerwine or Pepsi Cola?
Cheerwine.
Damn.
I don't even have to hear the second
Quick.
Number 2, Bojangles or Cookout?
A Cookout.
Okay.
We've got 8 more days of watermelon milkshake. So
Sounds like
by the time you listen, you will probably have missed the watermelon milkshake. But 2025 summer.
Exactly.
Sweet or unsweet?
Sweet. Is there? You mean tea?
Yeah.
I know. Some people are like unsweet. Yeah.
Depends on where you're from.
You're from Beaufort County?
I am.
Yeah.
I know my answer.
I know mine too.
Yeah.
It's half and half.
Oh God.
Carolina or Duke?
Neither.
Oh, yes.
Ooh.
What's your team?
I went to UVA.
Okay.
I went to Virginia. I stay agnostic.
Sticking with UVA.
I did go to Duke for grad school. I do not claim them though because they killed light rail in the triangle.
They did.
So
They
F
did.
Duke.
But thank you for educating you.
I paid them plenty of money. I don't have to thank for anything.
That's really all we got, Blair. Thank you
is.
so much for your time. Thank you for continuing to educate us. We're going to continue to stalk your Instagram and watch
Please
all
do,
the videos.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would really like folks to know about Carolina Forward, how to get involved and engaged?
I mean, you can follow us on social media, sign up for our email. We're all on carolinaforward.org, and we appreciate anything people want to do and to stay involved and stay engaged and stay informed with what's going on in our state.
Awesome. We'll do that. Thank you,
Blair.
Blair.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Down Ballot Banter. We hope y'all enjoy diving into the tentacular world of local politics with us.
Yeah, and don't forget, this podcast is an extension of Monet's beautiful dream, the Down Ballot Brunch, where there are 3 simple steps. It's to eat, have a conversation, and to act.
That's right. Have a conversation using this podcast episode, the Down Ballot Brunch chat guide, or your own prompts. Write a note to an elected official on a Down Ballot Brunch postcard. Share quotes from your convo on social media, with consent, of course. Or text 3 friends about their voting plans and find out what matters to them.
And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like, share, subscribe. If you're listening on other platforms, be sure to rate and review. Share it with your people.
Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep up with the Down Ballot Banter.